Ma'am,
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our 26th Resilience Lecture hosted by the Center for Historic Houses of India at UP Jindal Global University. I'm very, very excited about today's event. It's in many ways exemplary and special at the same time. We can see from the number of speakers that historic houses are very much a family affair. They are very much about the present and the past, and they're very much about the vision of those who try to keep these buildings alive and fill them with life as well. Just a few words about the Center for Historic Houses, which was set up in 2019. If you're interested in collaborating with us, please connect with us through email, have a look at our website or mention it in the chat. We are there to cater for three main stakeholders: owners of historic houses of India, heritage experts and related industries, and the general interested public. These are the things we care about. Historic houses are more than just tourism, and today's example is very much about this, because this is a brilliant example to deal with palaces as hotels, but also as a central point in Jaipur, for example. It's so popular, so many people come and visit locally as well. It's also about museum and heritage and many other things. And it, of course, it provides work to so many people who live in the vicinity. So historic houses are also about poverty alleviation. And of course, the other thing, they promote contemporary design inspired by historic houses. And I'm very excited today to not only have the Kanota family, but to also have Marie-Anne Audejean from the Netherlands, who has created something that is possibly the most photographed interiors in all of India. And it's a beautiful vision, and it's exciting, exhilarating, it's charming, it's elegant without being pompous, it's innovative, it's poetic, and it is a beautiful blend between the past and the present, and between the East and the West. And of course, historic houses are also associated with artisans and the creative industries. You'll also see the example here with Narayan Nivas, which is very much about design culture as well, where you have designers in their showrooms on the premises of the property. And historic houses can also be about animal welfare, as we've seen in many of our resilience lectures, whether it's about horses or dogs or many other issues around animal welfare. So we work in India, but also globally. We have an internship program at the University of Oxford. We have two lecture series. Today's lecture is one of our lecture series called Resilience, Historic Houses of India and Their Custodians. And you will see that resilience is a fantastic term if we talk about historic houses and their owners, because that's what they really have to be, resilient. And I thought the term is also a lovely term during the pandemic. So here you see some examples of the resilience lectures that we've had before. Our other lecture series is called Great Minds and Heritage in Historic Houses. We've worked with fantastic speakers from the Getty Foundation, City Palace Jaipur, the Port Road Institute, the Frick Collection, the Louvre, the Smithsonian, and the Victoria and Albert Museum, just to mention a few. So, and one aspect that we focus on is a network of palace museums. Our property today, or one of the properties associated with the Kanota family, is also a museum. So we are very, very excited about this, and we invite other palace museums in India to join hands with us, so we can have a fantastic network to promote knowledge exchange and exhibitions and share expertise and create events. With this, I'd like to hand it over to Vidushi Pal Singh, who is who married into the Kanota family, and she is managing Castle Kanota, and she has a background in mass media and history, and it's wonderful to have you. And she prepared a lecture for us, and then we'll have the other members of the family speak and answer some questions, and Marie-Anne talk specifically about Palladio and Narayan Nivas. So let me just stop screen share, and So thank you, Dushi. Now you are able to share.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the Center for Historic Houses and Dr. Schmidt for having us here this evening. And I'm very happy, my father-in-law, my husband, and I, and of course, we're very glad that Marianne could also join us. I'm very happy to have you here today and to be talking to you about the history of our family and, as this lecture so speaks, the resilience of the Kanota family and the people of our family. So without further ado, I'm just going to start the lecture. Okay. So our talk for today is called Viewing the Future in the Light of the Past, because being from a historic family and being from a historic house, you cannot move into the future without completely letting go of the past. So the topics that we will be covering today are the history of the House of Kanota, the making of a museum, from Jagirdars to hoteliers and businessmen, and then our further business ventures, which will be taken up by my father-in-law, my husband, and of course Marianne as well, Chikarbag, Bapaladio, and our vision for the future. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine. Perfect.
Thank you. And the screen share is also working?
Yes.
Yeah.
All visible.
Okay. So the House of Kanota, our history starts from, well, it's basically like every old Rajput family, thousands of years old, but our history in Jaipur starts from 1861, when Thakur Zorawar Singh Ji, the fountainhead of the Kanota family, migrated from Jodhpur to Jaipur, and he was enrolled in the state service under Maharaja Ram Singh II. He became a trusted member of council and minister. And in 1879, he was granted the Jagir of Kanota and the title of Tazimi Sardar. And 1876, Castle Kanota was completed. 1896, Kanota Bagh and the site of the present Naranavas Palace was granted. And after him, his son Thakur Narayan Singh Ji was also an integral part of the royal household. He was the head of the Jaipur household, His Highness's household, and the commander of his bodyguard, which involved very confidential things like preparing his hookah or preparing his meat, which in those days there was a real risk for poisoning. So you had to be a real close confidant to be trusted to those duties. And after the reign of Maharaja Ram Singh, there was Maharaja Madho Singh Ji who ascended the throne. And for the next 20 years, Thakur Narayan Singh Ji served as the police chief of the restive Shekhawati region. Now, it was a semi-autonomous region, so Thakur Narayan Singh Ji was given the responsibility of keeping that area under control and being a liaison between the Thakurs of Shekhawati and the Jaipur administration. After which he became the guardian to the minor Maharaja Jai Singh of Alwar and a senior minister in the Alwar government. And in 1908, he returned as the Thakur Sahib of Kanota after the death of his father, Thakur Zorawar Singh Ji. His son, Thakur Amar Singh Ji, is after whom we based our museum in Kanota. And the thing is that he had a collector's temperament. He was a typical Edwardian gentleman, but also he lived on this sort of liminality of two worlds. He was also the head of an old family, old Rajput family, but he was also one of the first Indians to be inducted in the British Indian Army as an officer. So throughout his life, for 44 years, he decided to keep a diary in English, and he left us with 89 volumes and several thousand pages of all his thoughts and ideas, and this fine line that he had to tread between being a Hindu Rajput aristocrat and an educated Edwardian gentleman. So on September 3rd, 1898, he began writing his diary. And in 1900, he sailed to China to quell the Boxer Rebellion as part of the Jodhpur Risala. So before he was inducted in the British Indian Army, he was part of the native state forces of Jodhpur, because our family originally migrated from Jodhpur, so the loyalties partially lay there as well. So he started his military career with the Jodhpur Lancers, and when he was only 19 years old, he fought in the Boxer Rebellion. And throughout his time in the Boxer Rebellion, he wrote 700 pages about his entire experiences over there, about the temperature, about the climate, about all of the soldiers over there, the different styles of parade, different styles of marching, their temperament, in such great detail that he used to write about the relationship that the junior soldiers would have with the senior officers, about what sort of distance or respect was maintained between them, what sort of cavalry parade they would have, what was their riding style, absolutely everything. And from the climate to the food, everything. And then when he comes back from the Boxer Rebellion, he is invited to join the Imperial Cadet Corps by Viceroy Lord Curzon. So the Imperial Cadet Corps was the precursor to the Indian Military Academy. And Lord Curzon wanted to give a place for the military aspirations for the martial races of India, because after the British had come, obviously it was all peace and all our internal and external affairs were being negotiated by the British. So all this martial talent was, so to speak, going to waste. So the first batch of the Imperial Cadet Corps had 20 cadets. Among them was Amar Singh Ji, who was a Risaldar at the time. And throughout his time in the Imperial Cadet Corps, he graduates in 1904. He writes 2,500 pages of his interactions with his English officers, of his time with his fellow cadets. And of the batch of 20 cadets, only 4 managed to graduate, and he's one of those 4. So he graduates in 1904 as Lieutenant Amar Singh. And in 1914, he gets his next chance to go on a campaign to fight in the First World War. And it was his first time to Europe. And he writes almost 1,000 pages about his time in Europe in his diaries. So he spent about 3 weeks waiting for deployment orders from his senior officers, because this was the first time colored troops were being used in an international war. So the British weren't sure about where the Indians' loyalties would be, because just before he landed in France, there was a platoon of about 20 Afghans who were defected to the Germans. So this was a very crucial time for him and for the honor of the nation to be proven. So he writes very deeply and very, very passionately about how it is very important for us to fight and make a name for ourselves. And a lot of times these questions have come up. Did he think about independence at that time? Did he think about the independence movement that was happening back home? But he was one of those people who felt that he had a certain respect for the British as well, but he felt that you had to prove yourself to be able to manage yourself. So he felt that the First World War was actually an excellent time for the Indians to gain the respect of the British and gain control of their own destiny. So he writes almost 1,000 pages about the conditions in the First World War, the morale of the men, the situation in the trenches, and his fascination, so to speak, of modern warfare, seeing artillery guns and seeing planes and seeing tanks and all of these things being used in battle for the first time. So he comes back from the First World War and he is sent on a campaign to Waziristan. Now this was a patrolling campaign because of the fallout of the Third Anglo-Afghan War. So it had become again a very restive area, similar to what we are seeing in Afghanistan now. It's actually what has been happening throughout the years. Every time someone goes into Afghanistan, it becomes a real mess, and then peacekeeping forces have to be sent. So he was part of that campaign in 1919, and he happened to be one of the first recorded non-white soldiers to command a troop of white soldiers in battle when his senior officer was temporarily unavailable. He retires from the British Indian Army and he comes back to the Jaipur state, where he raises Jaipur's first cavalry regiment, which is organized along modern army lines. Of course, Jaipur always had a cavalry. Rajputs always fought on horses, but this was raised, and the troops were trained and commissioned along modern Indian army lines. And this was called the Kachawa Horse, which now is the headquarters of the 61st Cavalry, which is the only cavalry regiment in India. In 1928, he also built the Narayan Nivas Palace as it stands today. And an interesting fact about the Narayan Nivas Palace is that it came entirely out of his salary from the military, because he had many younger brothers to support from the Thikana. Even though he was head of the Thikana, he decided to spend only the money that he got from his salary into building Narayan Nivas. He retired in 1936 as the Commander-in-Chief of the Jaipur State Forces. And he also received a personal distinction of Rai Bahadur from the Viceroy, which was a personal distinction of Sardar in waiting to the Viceroy of India. Now, these are a couple of photographs that we've compiled from Amar Singh Ji's albums. So he was, among many things, among his soldiering career and his life as a diarist, he was very keen in the modern technology of the day, photography being one of them. So he left us some 18 photo albums filled with pictures from everything from the British Raj and his travels abroad. So this is them at the Great Wall of China. This is a place called Shanghai Quan. This is where the Great Wall of China meets the sea. This is right at the end of the Great Wall of China. So they were there for roughly a year for the Boxer Rebellion. This is again a group of Chinese officials and Japanese and Russian officers, again at Shanghai Quan. And so after they were done with the campaign in China, they decided to visit the Far East, and Sir Pratap, his mentor, the colonel of the regiment of the Jodhpur Lancers, they traveled to Japan and they were received at the palace, at the Kyoto Palace by the emperor. And this is a sketch of Maharaja Sir Pratap Singh in a Japanese newspaper, which he's preserved and he pasted in his photo albums for us.
Vidushi, just one issue. I'm just hearing from the audience, can you make it larger? Because currently the screen is blocked.
Okay, should I go over the previous photos again?
No, let's just start from here where you are, and maybe is there something like gallery view, because this is not a PowerPoint presentation, so we're just experimenting with something new. Let's see whether we can work this out.
Is it large enough for the audience now?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this is the first batch of the Imperial Cadet Corps that escorted the Viceroy at the Delhi Darbar of 1903, the Darbar that was held in honor of Edward VII's coronation. So you can see Amar Singh Ji is right at the back over here, right in the middle. Again, he was extremely fond of reading. He would read almost 60 books in a year. So he left us a library of close to 3,000 books, several of them first editions, and on every conceivable topic: agriculture, animal husbandry, modern warfare, history, literature, both English and Hindi and Marwari, medicine, everything. He was a voracious reader. This is a photograph of the Kachawa Horse Regiment, and this is from the inauguration of the regimental temple, which is now the regimental temple of the 61st Cavalry. And this is his drawing room in Mao. Mao is an acronym for Military Headquarters of War, which is in central India. It's a very important posting. And there he was an ADC to General Omur Craig. As soon as he graduated from the Imperial Cadet Corps, he joined the general at Mao, and this is his drawing room over there. So you can see in our later pictures as well that our style of doing interiors in both Kasi Kanota and Narayan Nivas is informed with this old British Edwardian style of decor. And in the museum, we have this picture, and we still have these chairs that we put on display over there from his original furniture. This is a postcard of Captain Amar Singh that had been published in France. And this was at a time where they thought it was only the European war. And for the non-French speakers, the translation reads, he is a captain of the Indian Army, a noble cavalier, fighting for his king for justice and civilization. This is again another picture of a cavalry charge from his albums. So this I felt was a little important to read out from his diaries on the importance of keeping records so that it's a little apparent to everyone who hears about his diaries to realize how deeply he would think about everything. So this is just a little excerpt from his diary that he wrote on September 17, 1915. He says, on my visit to the India office, just to preface, this is when he is in Europe during the First World War. On my visit to the India office, Lord Crewe, Secretary of State for India, asked me whether it would be a good thing to move them to a warmer climate. I said by them, he means the Indian soldiers. Again, the top brass was very concerned about Indian soldiers coming from a tropical climate to Europe and in the trenches and in the cold and wondering how they would fight. I said that it would be the worst thing that could possibly happen. You do this out of concern for our well-being, but in the future, some blighter who has no sympathies with us would fling it in our teeth that we were not considered good enough to fight against the Germans and so were sent back. I would rather all of us Indians die here than be sent away and have people say that we were too weak to fight on European soil. All men die, and what are the lives of a few thousand compared to the honor of a nation? So from Amar Singh Ji's reflections on the war and the Indian Army's part in it, it was probably the most revealing note on the necessity of keeping records. So to my mind, it is a thing of greatest importance to keep up a nation's records. In this, we are very backwards. I'm sorry to say that none of our chiefs ever think of it. It has been my opinion that both Jodhpur and Bikaner, who have brought their troops to fight in this worldwide conflict, ought to have brought their own charans, who are poet historians, who are our hereditary recorders. Gumanji Kuchi of Indaroka is in charge of the historical department at Jodhpur, and one day, while talking to him, I tried to impress on him the necessity of getting up a charan. It was of no use. He told me that he had got names of all the Rajputs down who were serving in France, and I told him that he could not do so. What we want is a man of learning and imagination who would write from personal experience. Sir Pratap, his mentor, said that all we do will be recorded in the British books. The English historians will treat about the war in a general way, and what we can expect is a mere mention that the Jodhpur Lancers had also come and did good work. Even the regiments keep their own histories because the national books have no space for them individually. Poetry is the best form in which record ought to be kept. It is only through this means that the great deeds of our heroes from the most ancient times have been kept. The art of composing poetry is fast disappearing from Rajputana. Formerly, our ancestors had no wide scope. Kabul was the furthest they ever had their troops, but now we have got the first chance to come to Europe, and we are missing a chance of immortalizing our deeds. How is a poet going to realize the shape and look of the country, the men, the cattle, the roads, the trenches, the climate, the snow, the frost, and the ice, which are things he has never dreamed of? The roar of the single guns, and then the rolling of the thunder and prolonged and continued bombardment. The hiss of the shells coming over and the sudden burst in the air with its various colored smoke. The rattle of machine guns, the sight and misery of the trenches, the men sinking up to their forks and them caked in mud, and the horrible sight of the killed and the wounded. The masses of barbed wire entanglements, the thousands of motor cars and lorries and bicycles, and the different kinds of people employed. It must be seen and studied. So now the question comes to how his legacy and his histories have been preserved. So this is a picture of my grandfather-in-law, Thakur Mohan Singh Ji, with Suzanne and Lloyd Rudolph, who were Harvard scholars who went on to become political science professors at Chicago University, and they had come through India on a road trip, and they found out through common acquaintances about this diary, and they worked with my grandfather-in-law for almost 34 years, publishing books and papers and in journals about the diaries and the socio-political climate of Rajputana through the lens of Amar Singh. And it was Thakur Mohan Singh Ji's wish that this entire collection of diaries of this very important historical resource, because the diaries contemplate the situations around them and the people around them. And he's been a ringside spectator to several important events in the first half of the last century. So it was a very, very important historical document, which my grandfather-in-law wanted turned into a museum, which was done by my father-in-law. He took up the project and then he was able to finish it in 5 years. So Reversing the Gaze, Between Two Worlds, and Swords Trembling in the Scabbards are some of the books that have been written about the diaries, if anybody is interested in doing further research about what's been written about him. Now we come to the museum collection. Now we have over 3,000 books, manuscripts, 89 volumes of diaries written from 1898 to 1942, 18 pre-independence photo albums, artworks, maps. There's an armory, there's transport objects, elephant and camel jewelry, and a lot of textiles, which comprise the entire collection at the General Amar Singh Kanota Museum, Library and Museum here at Kanota. Now, this is the museum space before my father-in-law had a chance to work on it. This was the original library of General Amar Singh when he was living in Kanota. These were his bookshelves, and this is his library. And this is what was created afterwards. What you see in the foreground are his diaries. These two are his diary entries. We periodically keep changing them for guests to peruse. And everything you see on the second and the third shelves, all of these are his entire diaries, all 89 volumes that he had written over 44 years. And again, this is the basement area before, and the basement area used to be Amar Singh Ji's bedroom when he used to stay at Castle Kanota and after. So everything you see in this section of the museum was personally owned and used by him. These were his lithographs that he collected, his portraits and his statuettes that he collected from his travels all over the world. That's his steamer trunk with his mess uniform. And right here in the background are the chairs that you had seen in the picture from the Mao cantonment living room. And these are some more pictures of the basement of Amar Singh Ji's bedroom. And he collected books on conceivably every topic. He was an extremely voracious reader, and he would read almost 60 books in a year. And at the end of every diary, he would maintain a ledger of all the books that he had read with comments on each author and contents of each book, whether it was good or bad. And whether it was good or bad, he would always finish it from cover to cover. This is the ground floor of the library. And this is the visual section where we keep the family's archives of paintings. Most of them are done in the Amir school. This is the armory. This phase we just finished this year in February. So this is Castle Kanota. This is our home, and this is where the museum and the library has been built. And Castle Kanota was completed in 1876 by Thakur Zorawar Singh Ji in likeness of the Lohagarh fort, which was a battle fort, an impregnable battle fort, which had inspired Thakur Zorawar Singh Ji and his building plans. And over to my husband now, who will be able to explain more about the architecture and the layout of the castle.
Hi. That's my father. Hello, everybody. Good evening. So, Kanota, the Kanota fort is one of the youngest forts from the Raj, and it was built in, as you know, in 1876. So, it's probably the youngest fort. There's no fort built after the Kanota fort. So, it was inspired by it was a mixture of military and luxury both. So, Zorawar Singh Ji was really inspired by the Lohagarh fort, which is designed as a battle fort, as a garrison battle fort. So if you see the ramparts all around with the two walled or fortified walls, there was a khai, a water channel all around, which is of course no longer today. So it was designed as a defense. They didn't neglect the parts like the Jana section. If you saw earlier, there was a small a yellow private portion in the building. That was the Janana section, which is the ladies' quarter where all the Thakuranis and all the daughters of the house and the ladies used to stay. So now here in this picture, you see these round holes in the walls. They are basically for the cannons to draw the cannons out, and then oil channels. So it was, and it's near it, all the exposed stone. So that's how was basically designed. This particular ramp were for the horses to pull the cannons from the ramparts. Although the fort has never seen a war, but it was designed in a way because that's how that I think that's what inspired Thakur Zorawar Singh that time. Yeah. If you have any questions, please ask. So now what we have done is we have converted the property. My father converted the property in 2007 as a hotel. Before that, it was just a private residence. And we built around 23 rooms, and the museum is one of the sections in the property. So 1/4 of the property is the museum, and rest is the hotel. We've tried to keep the originality to almost 90%. We had to uh, do some sustainable changes depending on today's demand in the rooms and things. But we've tried to keep the originality intact for the fort. If you can change the slide.
like wherever the original paint work and the original tin shade in the front of the building and the flooring, whichever we could sustain, we did try to sustain the original flooring and the paint in the main Darbar hall. There's the original paint, 150 years old. We have not touched it, even a brush has not been put on it. But here or there, where necessary changes have to be done, that only we did it for modern days requirement. That's all. Like the Western toilets and the air conditions and all. Not more than that.
So there was one thing which we were discussing earlier. That how did COVID affect us during these property during the pandemic time? Things was like we tried to keep a lot of things in house. So we've created. My father created an in-house dairy over here, in-house poultry. We get farm fresh vegetables from the farm. The grains is also from the farm. So oil, everything of the we've tried to keep everything intact in house, which helped quite a lot in the COVID. And it also for the guests coming in, it was quite a relief that okay, everything is being produced over here itself. Vidishi can go to Rajmahal. So this is another my father's maternal ancestral property on the banks of Benas, and
This property is from the period of Solanki dynasty, like 350 years old. When the Solankis used to rule this belt of this part of Rajasthan, and they had a fort on top. You can see it on the hill, still lying. It's called a Chaburza. There's no rooms inside as such, only baradaris where this was rest. It's not like you live permanently there. As and when required during the battle, during the enemy attack, they could just go and have a shelter there. But they are not permanently livable fort. It's called Chaburza. And down was made in 2-3 parts. The part on the right is made by the Solankis, and part on the left is made by the Togawa dynasty, like the Kachawa dynasty. So that is my mother's part. And we did a great restoration out there. Their walls are somewhere I could find 9 feet wide walls. 9 feet wide. I was shocked when I was doing the renovation. Then we figured out that there was a well on the side, and where they used to take these bullocks on top of the roof and there it was a Persian wheel. There they could pull the water from the river and use for drinking and bathing and garden and all those kind of things. Because it was shocking at one part of the fort why there's a 9 feet wall. Then we researched and we thought and lot of research into it, and we discovered that this could be the reason for the water.
So this is how it's been now.
This is this blue color inspired by Palladio. It was there, we just restored it. And they used to blue water body nearby, and they were, I think, inspired by the water and all. This is called No Choke, the Baradari. But they are 9 squares. It's not Baradari, but we can call it. It's called 9 squares. No Choki.
So the fresco work over here is original. So we tried my father did
This is
restore.
absolutely original. I didn't use any electric wirings on the roof, or I didn't put any fan on the roof. Didn't want it to spoil the 350 years old color, original intact color, pink color. So I did everything from the ground. Every wiring which is required for today's time, today's necessary, we did it from the ground. So yeah, surely we had to redo the ground, the marble, and rest is everything is intact. Another room, Vidushi, go to the another room, the golden one. That's it.
We have this one of the golden one.
No problem. I think you missed out that photograph. No problem.
Should I move to the next slide?
Narayanavas. So,
Nara-
so Narayanavas was initially a private residence during my father's young days. So he's practically grown up over here, lived over here during all his school time.
I was born in this house. There was
And
no system of going to the hospital in those days. So I was born in the first floor where the ladies' quarters were there. There was a room dedicated for the, they call it in our language, they call it Japa room. So the delivery room, where it was dedicated room, and all deliveries used to happen in that room only. And it was a very auspicious room, like, 30, 40 of cousins have been born in that particular room. All my nephews and my father's sisters, sons, and all cousins and first cousins and all everybody.
so my grandfather.
Till 1993, the joint family used to live here only in Narayan Nivas. Then my father decided to open a hotel with 8 rooms, because it was difficult to sustain in these such big properties, such big garden in modern days. And after independence, the source of income reduced. It was a sustainable idea, sustainable project to start a budget hotel in a low manner. Whatever the furniture was there in the house, which was being placed in the rooms, and home food used to be served. No butter chicken and no tandoori naan and those kind of things. The daily home food was served to the guests, and they all liked it. And it was just like that. We started, and later on, we are continuing the legacy of this. So now we created Narayan Nivas and other properties in a sustainable mode. Like Vidushi will start and let you know about what is the sustainable mode of hotels. Yeah.
So now today, around 45 rooms over here at Narayan Nivas, and so in 1984, the family decided to move back to the castle Kanota, where from since then everyone is still, we all of us will stay over here, and we decided, my grandfather decided to convert it into a hotel in a proper hotel. So from 8 rooms, we've grown to uh, 45 rooms today. And I think when a lot of people ask us this question, that why not 100 rooms, because of the space we have over there. But the thing we decide what the common thing of the family is, we don't want to go into the numbers and make it like a concrete jungle. It is uh, it's a garden house, so it has to be a garden house.
I'll just give you the important importance to it. What Pratap is saying, that we don't want to go for the numbers, because the grant, the state grant, which was of Narayan Nivas, which was been given to my great grandfather Zorawar Singh ji. This land was been given to him to make garden. बाग लगाने के वास्ते, create a garden. So we want to stick to that thing, and we don't want to go beyond that. So we are 80% is the garden still at Narayan Nivas, and 20% is the construction. Right now it's 13 acres of land at Narayan Nivas presently today.
So this is the main lobby. You can also call it the bar hall, but that's the main lobby of the hotel. And so, what another thing what we my father kept in mind and was very particular about when we were establishing the General Amar Singh Counter Library and Museum was the what are the original paintings, original artifacts, original memorabilia which were at Narayan Nivas were not moved from Narayan Nivas. So everything displayed, like the big paintings, the back cupboards, you see the artifacts, all originals, but we did not decide to move it from Nine move it to the museum at Kanotas. So because for us, Nine is also
As important.
as important as it's like a museum to itself. It's got its own charm. It's got its own character.
These, you see these two big sofas on the left and right, and one in the center with the black buck horns. You can't see it because it's covered behind this round table. They are the East India Company sofa. There's a logo in between, East India Company. If we zoom it and we let you know, uh, uh, Amar Singh ji bought it at Mau in an auction when the East India Company was packing up from India. The stuff, the sofas and lots of stuff, and he thought that he would put them in his drawing room. This is the logo. You can see it. You can zoom it a little bit more. Yeah. So now you can see the logo. So they are the original sofas. So we try to keep whatever original stuff wherever it was. We only moved very little stuff here or there, or transferred to Kanota to Narayan Nivas, or Narayan Nivas to Kanota. Where it was there, it is there.
So this was now become like an hub for Jaipur with these landmark restaurants called Shikar Bagh and Palladio. Palladio, I'll leave it for Marianne to speak about. So Shikar Bagh is another it's adjacent to Palladio, which is running as a restaurant bar again, and was designed as a hunting lodge concept.
So again, even the design of Shikar Bagh, designing it as a hunting lodge, is very informed by the Kanota family's inspiration as from Amar Singh Ji's time as the leading men of the family being Edwardian gentlemen. So you'll see these gun cabinets and these very characteristic European hunting lodge features and a lot of woodwork, which is not native to these parts of India. In Rajasthan, you don't see a lot of woodwork. It's more marble and it's more stone or araish. So this bar is right adjacent to Bar Palladio at Narayanavas itself.
Yeah. So, we decided to make create a space for a nice for designers and to get some nice retail space at Nayanavas, which it is also very well renowned. So it's called the Kanata Courtyard, and where we've tried to get all the best the designers, best jewelers to come and open their store over here. We've got good names like Andhra, Umrao, who over here with us.
So I think the idea over here for my father-in-law was to not get stuck in just the simple rut of running a heritage home simply as a hotel, or not to put all your eggs in one basket. And I suppose that is where the resilience also comes from. That's where the instinct for survival also comes from, is to have different avenues and different areas of economy to fall back on, and not just rely on one situation or one sort of avenue as tourism or rental income or things like that. So he likes to have like a bouquet of opportunities going for just one space. So Narayanavas is also, as aptly mentioned earlier, a living museum. There's a lot of history to the place. There's also a boutique shop stores, and there's also two rather iconic restaurants and bars which have been really popular and really a huge part of Jaipur's nightlife. So anybody who comes to Jaipur really does put Bar Palladio and Shikar Bagh on their list of places to see and to visit and to enjoy. And it was actually the crowd that came to Bar Palladio, to Shikar Bagh, and a lot of income that was generated from these shops that really sustained us through the pandemic, because simply relying on the tourism income and having to sustain such huge properties and huge number of staff, because we did not lay off any of our staff. So to keep the staff going and to keep the property going, maintenance costs are a thing anyway. Whether even if you switch off all the lights, the maintenance costs are still a thing. So having different avenues and investing in different business models also helped us through the pandemic.
Wonderful. So I think this is super inspiring to see, and the innovative approach and the respect for the family legacy at the same time. We are now moving to Palladio Bar, and I'm particularly delighted to have Marianne Ojans here, and this is the first time you're actually talking about it in public. I know you've given so many interviews, and I don't think there's any newspaper that hasn't written about Bar Palladio. Certainly the Wall Street Journal, El Decor, Architectural Digest, just to name a few. I'd be really curious if you could just tell us a little bit about how you all started and where the ideas come from, how long it took you to do this, and how you ended up here in Jaipur.
Good evening, everybody. It was, almost 8 years ago that we started, when created Bar Palladio. Barbara Miolini, who is a friend of mine, who is owner of the Bar Palladio, asked me to design this project. And it was my first interior project that I did in India and anywhere in the world. And we wanted to create, I lived in the hotel in Arenivas already, so I knew it very well. And before that, there was already an existing bar in this property. This is in the same space. And Barbara, who's Italian, wanted to create a bar that had a feeling of European and Indian kind of mix of all. And we decided to create a bar that was give a vision of how we foreigners actually see India in a little bit. Because many times people think about India and they don't always visit palaces and things like that, but they have possibilities. But we felt we had to give this vision somehow. So it took us 8 months to do this project. And we worked with all kinds of artists. I worked with Picasso, who created all the art. We worked with.
Sorry, and Maria, just to sorry, we need to unmute. We need to mute all the other speakers except all the participants except our speakers, please, because it's disturbing the lecture. Sorry, yes, please go ahead. If Shubham is there, and then we need to figure this out. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So we created a story of the bar, what is like a dream world. And anyway, we worked with different artisans. We worked with Gito, who made all the beautiful block prints. We worked with we made a bar out of everything was handmade also for this project, from the furniture to the fabric to the lights to the bar itself. We didn't change. We put a lot of mirrors in to make the bar look bigger. And I think what is the most iconic part of the bar is the color. I think that everybody was very shocked that we did use this color, and it was totally by surprise, to be very honest. I swim in the morning because they have a beautiful pool in the hotel, and I just came up with the color at that moment. It's not really anything else. Just it came like this, and what can I tell more about the bar?
Well, the thing is, you might say it's spontaneous. Yes. But to be honest, it's not spontaneous. It might come in this moment, it was triggered, but your whole culture, your whole life experience is still in there.
Well, I love culture and traditions and mixing of it. And it's just, we took everything a little bit out of context. Like, for example, these are traditional flowers, but we just made them a little bit bigger. And the same thing with the block prints. We just used a different kind of color because we used fluo, for example. The blocks were much bigger. Everything was a little bit different, but all put together, it has an Indian, it's absolutely an Indian feeling, but there is a little touch of European, I think, to
right.
us.
It is this beautiful blend, but you almost invented a new design language. And I think what you've done is so important for contemporary culture. Because I always say, this is not only about interior design, but it's interior design in a historic building. So my question is, to what extent is this a sense of place? And to what extent is the design related to the place? And to what extent is it related to the wider world and to your own kind of experience?
Well, I think it's a story. I think when you create something, I create always a story. And I think it's a feeling what you put into that. So I create a mood towards this. And I felt that it was a bar, so it should be masculine, and it should be, that it should be a dream world actually. And also obviously related to the Maharajas, but, and the history of India at the same time. And to put it all together, it is just a mix of all these elements at the same time. The tent has to do also because it is a feeling of India, and I mean I personally love tents, and it gives that intimacy when you sit in this tent, and it ports you somewhere to another world when you're in the property itself. Actually, many people come and they feel there is something special there, and I think it's just the building, the mix of the color, and I think also the paint, the artwork also.
Absolutely. It feels very uplifting, and it has this openness, and you see somehow the garden and the interiors belong together, whether it's at night or whether it's shortly before. You know, I think you opened in the afternoon at around 4. So it's just this garden feeling is there, and the inside and outside is there. That is really lovely. Now, what have you learned in the process? I mean, it's very exciting that this is your first interior design project. You are a designer, and I think it also shows that that design doesn't have borders, whether you do fashion design or even, you know, food and interiors, all of this kind of really belongs together. So what was your learning experience?
Well, it's definitely been a great learning experience because it's such an adventure at the same time. To work in India is a huge adventure. To work with all the artisans is incredible. It takes a lot of time and patience for sure. But the results are so amazing because you can do it here still in India, beautiful craftsmanship, but it's, you know, in other parts of the world, maybe you not can do anymore. I think it was an experience that, I mean, it changed my life absolutely for the second time. I mean, I designed many years ago in New York, and I was really young, and it was an incredible experience. I think Naranivas and Bar Palladio was the first time after many years that I did something again. And I think it was very spontaneous. It was free. I was completely given carte blanche to this project. So I don't know, I just put all my heart in it. And I think that you can feel that still. It's also a timeless space.
Yes, it is a timeless place. It's wonderful. And you mentioned the mood before, and I think this is really one of the strengths of the design that we have created. It has an incredible atmosphere. And, you know, sometimes people they buy furniture, they put it inside, and it's really kind of lifeless design. In what you do, and what I meant by culture is it's an overall kind of idea. It's not only putting or moving furniture around. And this is, related to the past, because this is how interiors were created in the past. You didn't only think about the furniture, but you thought about the color, the walls, the ceiling, the textiles. Everything was in the storytelling. Also, the meaning that is really fantastic. I'm still surprised. I mean, we see this end result. I think it's amazing that you've achieved this in such a short amount of time, because I know you also designed objects. You designed, the tableware and so many other things. But if you can lead us a little bit through there, and what were the challenges? Because you are a newcomer, you couldn't rely on a craftsman that you knew. So how did you even go about it? Finding the things, the objects, finding the people. What were the biggest challenges, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think I approach it very much as designing a collection, because you have to use all the different elements. So here we found the suppliers. I worked very close with Barbara on this project because she was very much part of this whole vision, because this was also her first project here. And we were lucky to meet immediately very good artisans with who we worked with. I think it's the timing, what takes a lot. It's the resistance and to get right to get across what you really like to do. But since it was so spontaneous, everything, we just went for it in every single way. So we took, I think, what is surprising for many, I think, Indian clients who come to the bar, is that the feeling they have. We took actually things that for them maybe are very simple. They see them all the time, but we put them actually inside the bar, and maybe that may, well, because we as foreigners see things maybe a little different, but for you it's maybe a very simple, for us it's maybe a treasure, you know. And I think what was the most difficult part of the thing is that of the putting the project together is there was some construction had to be done, and in the end it was to you know, things go slow when you do things handmade. You know, there's days that everything goes perfect, and there's other days that it goes very, very slow. And because you work with humans, and it's handmade at the same time.
So it's really fascinating to see that you changed the place, but the place changed you as well. And I think this brings us back to the Kanota family, because you know, I think especially designing something for the first time, it comes with a lot of intensity. All your life experience, all your travel, everything you've seen, everything you've loved, and so on, goes into there. So I think, you know, it has this very special, magical intensity in the place. But you also need the kind of patrons who believe in you, who give you this chance. And I think it's really wonderful that the Kanota family doesn't only respect the family legacy, but it also carries on this idea of patronage that is so much part, you know, of these palaces. And I think it's wonderful that you do this. It's you really deserve an award. I mean, everyone really goes there, loves it so much. It's really, really just inspiring to see what you do, and that you don't only rent out these spaces, but you really have a relationship with the people. You try to have the best for the place, and it's a kind of give and take relationship from both sides, which is really fantastic and exemplary for how to manage and run a historic property today. So thank you very much again for being here, and I hope, you know, I want to see more of this transformation of Palladio on you, and what you will do in the future also here in India.
I remember 8 years back, the concept and for Bar Palladio, and then so said that Marianne would be doing the interiors, and of course Barbara I got to know much later, but we knew Marianne much before we met Barbara. And Marianne actually stayed at the Kanota Castle at the fort. In long back, she used to stay over here, and I should drive her in my Jeep to Jaipur a lot of time with her dog. All three of us used to go. So we go back a long way, and she did when she did the interiors, and also my father was very open to change, and he said, okay, let's just try something new. And Bar Palladio was actually one of the first proper bar in the city. It changed the lifestyle, the nightlife of Jaipur. All thanks to Marianne's design.
Absolutely amazing. I'd like to invite our guests to ask some questions. I was kind of absorbed by the discussion. So maybe Julian, if you would like to, Julian, you joined later, right, today. Yes, something that I would like to know also is, you know, it's wonderful that you also create so many jobs for the people, and especially during the pandemic. It's very nice to see how you responded to the pandemic with the farming. So something that I usually ask owners of historic houses is in this respect, do you think that certain responses to the pandemic will there to stay? You will continue them, like for instance, the in-house kind of organic farming, for example?
Yes, see, we were doing that for ourselves earlier. What we did now, we tried doing it for everyone, and when we are continuing it, we're in fact expanding it now. So we are, and there's a whole big kitchen garden for the hotel under making right now at the Kanota property. So now that we're making it on a bigger scale and properly and more organized.
Great. Kudrat, if you're there, if you can just look at some of the questions. Let me just see. And yes, just one more question also. So you are currently, are you still offering the kind of stay vacation or kind of special rates for longer stays and so on at the moment? So for our audience, in case some of them would like to visit Jaipur if they are in India.
Now, see, as everyone knows, that during the winters, a lot of weddings which keep happening. So we offer long stays, but now it all depends on the dates available. Because during the winters, now from after Navratra, after Diwali, especially after Diwali, there'll be a lot of weddings. All the time, the property is completely sold out. But when there are dates, we do offer long staycations and vacations.
Great. There's a question from Marie-Anne from Neha Aurora. She was wondering, where did you design in New York City? I'm a huge fan of you, she's saying.
I created my own business in New York in 1994. So that is a long time ago. I didn't study in New York. I came there as an assistant for how do you say, stylist for the magazines. We used to work for Vogue and things like that. And then I created my proper brand, what's called Toka. And that is how I started in New York.
Lovely. Right. So again, thank you very much for being here. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you, collaborating, doing things together, and looking forward to the opening again of all the properties. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.